back to another episode of TBD Crafts with Gabriel. I of course am Gabriel, and today I am making a Super Mario diorama using this Super Mario Bros. Figure, and this mushroom, and this foam base. As you can see, I already marked off some of the areas here that I need to cut. First off, we got this this line here. That's where I'm going to cut the excess off, and the circle is where I'm going to retrofit a pipe. I'm going to use my foam cutter to cut the base to size. Now that I got that done, I'm going to go ahead and use this hot wire pen to cut out the circle. I'm going to do this outside off camera because it does produce a lot of fumes, and of course, as always, when doing anything like this, you want to make sure you're in a well ventilated area using a respirator. This hot pen tends to create more fumes than the wire table cutter that I have, so that's why I'm going outside to do this. Now that that's all cut out, I can go ahead and put in this here electric candle. Now this electric candle will serve as my tube, my green tube for this diorama. It has a little flickering light at the top, which I thought might be a cool effect, and so I made it so I can easily access the battery compartment should I need to change the batteries, and the switch for whenever I want to turn it on and off. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just using my Sharpie to mark off where I want the top part of the pipe to sit, and I'm going to create that using polystyrene. I couldn't tell you what measurement of polystyrene I used. I'm pretty sure it was 40 thousandths for the rings, 20 thousandths for the support little rectangles that I made. I know the gussets are a thing, however I was not thinking about that when I made this. I've learned a lot while making this, and I've learned a lot since making this when it comes to scratch building, and I'm going to incorporate a lot of that with the next build and with the end of this, because I did end up creating a couple boxes here. But in the process of making this, I did end up moving. This is the first video I've made so far that actually involves anything new that I've made in my new house. So all the videos I've made up until now have just been me finally editing old videos and old projects. This is finally me getting back to the present day, and so this is actually the last thing I did before moving, and finished it after I got here, several months after I got here actually.
One eternity later.
Alright, now that I'm finally completely moved and everything, you can see that the pipe is painted. Now, there is a little bit of an issue that I found with this pipe. I had to repaint it all because it did get a little beat up. The top part of the pipe is beat up. It is severely beat up from the move. I'll probably go ahead and remake this at a later point in time, but for now I'm going to just leave it the way it is, and I'm going to be happy with it. So now that it's all done, I can create the terrain paste with the plaster, finish this diorama, get it to completion. Now, one thing that I was struggling with this diorama was wondering if I should make this more realistic. Since it is beat up, I could paint it, weather the pipe to make it look more realistic, and use the flocking on the ground like I do with my other terrain-based dioramas. However, I decided that I'm going to stick to the cartoony aesthetic and just paint the green grass instead of doing all the realistic kind of pebbling and sand and flocking and all that stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and make it nice and smooth and as cartoony as I possibly can, and this will be a first for me. So we'll see how it goes. As always with creating the ground texture, we're going to go ahead and use this crafting plaster, Mod Podge, some paint, and water. Again, I don't have an exact ratio of each that I use. I just kind of mix until I get the consistency that I like. And of course the paint is just to make sure I get full coverage on the white base. So I'm going to go ahead and ice this cake and move on from there. now that my cake is properly iced, I'm going to go ahead and lay down some brown acrylic paint as the base layer, the base coat, and just move on from there. The brown that I'm using is just your average run-of-the-mill brown acrylic matte paint that I got from Walmart actually. So you can get it at any hobby store, any Walmart, any brown paint will really do. And I'm gonna paint this, paint the top, the edges, and move on to the grass. Now that the forbidden brownie is nice and chocolatey looking, absolutely delicious, we're going to go ahead and use some of the green paint that we actually used for the ground texture and stipple it on. So we're just going to put some on the tip of the brush and just tap it onto the surface there. So that way it looks still two-dimensional, but enough like grass. We're going to do nice thin coats, that way you can still see kind of some of the brown underneath, and thicken it up in certain places but leave it nice and thin. So it looks as realistic as possible while still trying to maintain a cartoon aesthetic. Now that the green is all done, I could leave it here and call it a day, but I am not satisfied with this. I think it still looks far too empty, too much open space going on, which is kind of what I wanted, but also not, because I want to still be able to get other figures and put them on. So what I'm doing is I created these two boxes. One I was not very happy with, the other one I am very happy with. It was the second one I made. The first one I made, I decided to keep it in the diorama anyway, and I'm going to turn one of them into the classic brick block that you see in the game, and the other one is going to be the mystery block. The mystery block being closed on all 6 sides of the cube, and the brick block being closed on only 5 sides, still being hollow and open underneath. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a template, and I'm taking some masking tape and going over my original template 5 times. So I'm going to leave the bottom side completely flat, so that way it stays flush to the surface and doesn't wobble around. And I'm going to cut these question marks out of the polystyrene and glue it straight on to the block there, trying to center it as best as possible. Now, funny thing too, I figured out that a hole punch creates, for me anyway, the perfect size circles to act as the rivets on the corners of the mystery block. Now I know that the mystery block is actually, they're divots, not rivets, but I went ahead and went with the rivet style because that is what I remembered in my head, and I was wrong, but I still think it turned out pretty well. Now the mystery block's all done, I'm going to go ahead and cut out some of these polystyrene into sheets to test tiny little rectangles, making some of them a little messy looking, not perfect rectangles, just so it looks that bit more cartoony. and just kind of puzzle piece them into the onto the block as best as possible. I considered just painting the bricks on there, but I went ahead and went with this method just so it looks that touch bit third dimensional. So we're going to go ahead and do that, paint it up, and we're pretty much done after that. And for those that may be wondering, I'm sure there's someone out there that is, I did go and change this block a couple of times, ripping off some of the strips, or what would be bricks, and redoing some of it, looking at reference images, going back and forth. It was a pain in the butt, but I eventually got it done. The gaps in between might be a little too wide, but I got it done nonetheless, and when it was all said and done, I actually quite liked it. This was definitely a trust the process kind of moment for me. And for those wondering, the blocks are 2 inches by 2 inches. That's the scale I went with for this Mario figure. I thought it looked pretty spot on. Maybe it could have done 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, but I didn't want to deal with that. This was good for me. Cleaning up my workspace to transition over to airbrushing here pretty soon. I cleaned it up so I can move my old hobby mat on top to airbrush on top of, so I can try and preserve this hobby mat as long as possible. It's got another side to it, but I didn't feel like having to deal with my camera and the white balance on that, because the other side is mostly white. And I'm a baller on a budget, so I gotta make this hobby mat last as long as possible. Speaking of budgets, I think this diorama cost me a total of $20, if not a little less. Mainly because I already had a lot of the supplies like paints and airbrush and whatnot. But if I can do it, you can do it. You know, it goes to show that saving the styrofoam used for packing furniture goes a long way. For the bricks themselves, I didn't have a light brown or copperish kind of paint, so I did mix some orange and brown together. At first I went way more complicated than I need to, trying to mix red, yellow, and brown together, forgetting that I had this huge bottle of orange paint. So what I did was I started with orange, added a little bit of brown into it as I went to try and get the kind of ochre color that I was going for. And I ended up having to do several layers on this. I think I did 3 layers each brick, but I eventually got it nice and thick and opaque and got it how I wanted it looking. So once that was all painted, I went ahead and removed the masking tape off of the yellow block. The easiest way for me to have painted this, because I had very little yellow paint left, was super dilute the yellow paint with some airbrush thinner, and then keep the rivets and the question marks nice and masked, so that way when I removed the masking tape they were still nice pristine white, so I didn't have to worry about painting those afterwards, trying to put on a bunch of layers of white paint to try and make it nice and opaque. As always, of course, do as I say, not as I do. Don't cut towards you. Don't use a knife and running it towards you. That is not a good idea. You will end up cutting yourself. I have cut my fingers more than I could possibly admit to. So cut away from yourself. You'll save yourself some money on band-aids in the long run. But with that, went ahead and removed the last bit of tape off the top here. The question mark did come up a little bit at the end there. I went ahead and put some more glue down to make sure that stayed, some more plastic cement. But with that, It was all over with, all done, and it's time to move on to the glamour shots. Thank you all for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video as much as I enjoyed putting it together. If you liked what you saw and want to see more, consider hitting that subscribe button and ringing that notification bell, and hit that like button. Feedback is always welcome, whether it's positive or negative, so consider too leaving a comment down below. It really helps me out, and it helps the channel out as well. Thank you all again for watching. Until my next video, YouTube thinks that you'll like this other video, so if you haven't already, why not go ahead and check it out. And as always, remember to hit the link in the description to check out my Instagram. I'll see you all in the next one.